So it's Father's Day. So I'll start with this Hafiz thing about what we inherit. All the talents of God. This is what we inherit from the Father. All of the talents of God. All of the talents of God are within you. How could this be otherwise with your soul derived from His genes? I love that expression. All the talents of God are within you. And sometimes Hafiz cannot help but to applaud certain words that rise from my depths. Like the scent of a lover's body, hold this book close to your heart, for it contains wonderful secrets. So there was this guy named Abram, and nobody actually names their son Abram, by the way. But it seems like in those days someone did. Abram actually means father. And I just think about that. You have a son and you're talking it over, what are you going to name this boy? And you say, well, I'd like to name him Father. Probably not your first choice. So this is one of you see this immediately in all of these Bible stories, that these people are named things that no one would ever name their child. And the reason that is because they are a set of characteristics. They are meant to be a lesson. They are part of the lesson of the story. And the reason that they have that name is so that you understand what the story is about. Because otherwise you don't get the lesson. This is another reason why we know that the stories in the Bible weren't meant to be taken literally. Because it's all about the message. It's all about the lesson. It's not about history. So Abram has a young wife, beautiful young wife, and her name is Sarai. Nobody names their daughter Sarai because Sarai means bitter contentiousness. So now you may have some children that are contentious and occasionally bitter, but you do not name them that. And so Sarai and Abram are moving through the land, and they come into a city, and they're received well, but Abram is afraid. He really hasn't developed his full character yet, and he's afraid that the men of the city will kill him and take his wife. So what he tells them is that Sarai's not his wife, but his sister. And that he is, and so that like changes the whole dynamic, right? Now, so you think about the culture of the time. That if you go to a strange city and you had your wife with you, they may kill you and take your wife. But if it's your sister, then they would be like, some of them would try to be like suitors or something, right? They wouldn't just kill the brother and take the sister. It's an odd way of thinking. And the other thing that's going on with him is the fear of the whole thing. And later it turns out it's revealed, and the ruler of the city asks him, well, why didn't you just tell us in the first place? And he says, I was afraid. I was afraid that you would do something to me and take her. And so we see here he is still, at this point in the story, he is an undeveloped character. He has underdeveloped character. And that he's still at this point where he's allowing fear to rule his life. Well, he gathers together certain family members, and they live a pretty nomadic life. They're out, they're actually out in the wilderness after some time, and the thing that's going on with Abram is he continually is getting messages from God. Now, here again, this is a story about us. Remember the premise that we're working with is the premise that Meister Eckhart put forward hundreds of years ago when he told the people that the Bible is not a story about God. It is a book about you. And so every character in the Bible, if we read it with the sense of trying to get the message, every character represents a characteristic in us. So all the bad ones and all the good ones. They represent a characteristic in us and tendencies in us. And the stories are analogs to the events that happen in our life. And that's why, if you have an open mind, you can just about take the Bible and open it up to just let it open up to any page and start reading, and it will have something to say to you about the situation that's going on in your life right now. Because it's very similar, and I'm not, some people might not like this analogy, but it's similar to reading Shakespeare. It really is an encyclopedia of man and the experiences that we have. So okay, God is speaking to Abram continually. Now, he is the leader of his little family group. He has no children, though. All this family group is their relatives and all of the servants that they've gathered, but he is the leader of this family group. The reason he is the leader of the family group is because when God speaks to him, he hears more clearly. He hears more clearly than the other folks in the group. And then he tells them about it. Now, you can read the story in this way. You can say that this is actually happening. Okay, God is speaking directly to Abram. What I'm going to suggest to you is that God is speaking directly to you. And the only reason that we don't actually hear it is because we're obscuring that voice with something else. We're obscuring the voice because our small self, the ego, the personality, is speaking louder, trying to overpower the voice of God. Well, Abram knew how to be quiet and listen, but he wasn't getting it all really clear, right? So a messenger comes and says, actually these two angels come to talk to him. And they just show up, and seems like everybody in the little family gathering know that these are angels. And this is really what's meant in the story is they are messengers from God. Now everybody sees them. Now many people just think about this as being he just had inspiration, but that's not really what happened. So he got the message, and what they told him was, you are going to be father of multitudes. Well, they don't have any children. And at this point, his wife is 90 years old. 90, according to the story. And one of the messengers goes to her and tells her, you're going to have a baby. And she laughs. And the angel says, what are you laughing about? And she says, I'm not laughing. And he says, oh yes, you laughed. Well, of course she can't believe it. She's 90 years old. She can't believe how she's going to have a baby. Oh, but sure enough, she turns up with child. Now, what's happened in the intervening years is that because they didn't have any children, Sarai sent her maidservant into Abram to say, listen, you got to have some kids. So I'm going to send my maidservant to see you, and her name was Hagar. And she sends Hagar in, and of course they do what they do. And Hagar is pregnant and gives birth to Ishmael. And now, Sarai knew that this was like, she felt like she was doing the best thing, right, to do this. But then afterwards, she was very upset about the whole situation, especially as Ishmael's growing up, she is living in her namesake. She is living in bitter contentiousness. She's upset, she's jealous, she's, all of this. And then when this thing occurs where all of a sudden she's pregnant, she starts to think about it even more. And the baby is born, and they name him Isaac, which actually the name makes reference to laughter, because that's what she did first. She laughed, right? So she gives birth to the laughter that she laughed. It's just marvelous, right? So now, Abram is, just like any father, Abram is teaching Ishmael all the things that Ishmael needs to learn. But Sarai, now by the way, her name is changed to Sarah. And Sarah means beautiful princess. She's 90. And her name is changed to beautiful princess. But she's not all that beautiful in her thinking at this point yet, anyway. And she tells Abraham, now, father of multitudes, that what he needs to do is get rid of Ishmael and Hagar. They got to go. Because she's afraid that Ishmael is going to inherit, he's the firstborn, right? Ishmael's going to inherit Isaac's place in the world, which is leader of their little group. So she's on him about it, and he decides that he's going to do this. So now here's the first point where you're thinking this is just not even human, what's going on here, because he actually banishes Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness by themselves, a boy and his mother. His son, and really his lover, just sends him into the wilderness. Now, God spoke to him, though, before he did this, and said, don't worry about it, it's going to be okay. These are the kind of messages, if you're getting messages like this from God, you need to question what's going on, all right? So, and when you're reading, you go, wait a minute, this isn't right. How can this be right? But it turns out it is right, because they are protected. They are protected. And actually what happens, and many of you know this, what happens is Ishmael grows up to be the father of Islam. So he is the father of that entire, so he is like the progenitor of that entire group of people who end up becoming the Muslims. Isaac grows up, and all of a sudden one day, Abraham gets a message from God that says, I need a sacrifice. And Abraham says, okay, I'm going to get you a sacrifice. Now, that's the other thing. If you get a message from God saying he needs a sacrifice, it's not him talking to you. So now this just goes to show how it's easy for us to believe that these things that come to us, we think perhaps in meditation, these ideas that come to us, it's not always God speaking. We can get some crazy ideas in our head, and we can talk ourselves into thinking that somehow this is what I'm supposed to do, and it's really not. So anyway, God says I need a sacrifice, and here comes this theme again of sacrificing the best of the best, because this is how you had to make a sacrifice. When you made a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, it had to be the best. It had to be the best, the best lamb of the flock. It couldn't be some old sickly thing. And so the message comes to him that he actually needs to sacrifice Isaac, his son, who he waited till he was 100 years old to have. And that's the sacrifice, and you've got to do it. And he's interpreting this message from God as a test of his faith. And his whole leadership of the group is based upon him being this absolutely steadfast person who does what God tells him to do. And so he says, okay. So he tells Isaac, he says, get your stuff together. Let's get some. We're gonna make a sacrifice. Get these things. We're gonna and as now he doesn't actually tell Sarah what he's gonna do, but she gets a sense of some kind of danger, and she says, "No, don't." And in the story anyway, he doesn't tell her what he's gonna do, and. Isaac says to him, well, what are we going to say? He knows they're going to do a sacrifice, and he says, what are we going to sacrifice? And Abraham says, well, God will provide the sacrifice when we get there. So we're just going to go up on top of the mountain. And so he takes him up there on top of the mountain. He builds the pyre. He has him actually, now listen, this is really kind of cold. He has Isaac gather together the stuff to build the pyre that he's going to put him on and sacrifice him and then burn him up. I mean, now I want to get a picture of this. Do you really want to take this literally? So, okay, so he gets him up and he hides the knife, right? He hides the knife so he doesn't see it. He throws him up on the pyre and then he's just about to do him in. Now, I'm not saying he wasn't struggling. Because this is what you hear, in the text, there's conflict going on. But this is insanity, what's happening, right? Well, right before he gets ready to sacrifice his son, the angel says, hey, what are you doing? I mean, it's just like that. And it is. It's actually like that in the story. It's like, what are you thinking about? So it actually, in the story, the angel or the messenger from God, the divine idea, whatever it is, says to him, have you lost your mind? In a way. And stops him and says, that's not the sacrifice. Sacrifice is over there. And it turns out there's a ram whose horns are caught in a bush. And they use that as the sacrifice. Now, I'm just thinking about the dinner conversation after this. Well, Abraham has a number of other adventures after this, including the Sodom and Gomorrah incident. We won't talk about that. Some other time we'll talk about that particular one. And his cousin Lot. But here is the father of, and the reason they call him the father of multitudes is because everything grows out of Abraham. Islam grows out of Abraham, the Jewish nation, the Hebrew nation grows out of Abraham, and all of Christianity grows from Abraham. Everybody. So this is why you'll hear this reference to saying, people will say, we are all the sons of Abraham. Now this is an important message. Now, but you can see why the Muslims are a little bit upset about the whole business right from the very beginning. Because Abraham sends the boy and his mother out into the desert and lets them fend for themselves, right? So they always felt like they were like second-rate citizens in the whole scheme of things. And actually, the truth of the matter is, we've treated them like that through the ages. When I say we, I'm telling you we're all complicit in this. So you may not remember it, but we're all up in it. And still today, we continue. Many times, I mean, we're trying to be better. We're working our way to be better, but all those old prejudices and all of that fear of the alien are still within us. So Abraham Father of multitudes. The prophecy comes true. And this really is the theme of this thing. I mean, it's Father's Day, so it's appropriate to talk about Abraham. But the real message is that the voice of God is speaking to us all the time and giving us these messages. Now, it has been said that there comes a time, and it's actually in the text. So, okay, so these stories are written and they're passed down, and people are hearing the stories. And they say, well, wait a minute. God is speaking to all these people, but I don't hear God speaking to me, so what happened? And so instead of someone who actually didn't know the reason why people weren't hearing said, well, this is the reason. God decided to stop talking to us because we were so bad. And this is actually and it's in there. Somewhere along the line, God cuts off the, he says, I'm not talking to men anymore. I'm done talking to them. They're so mixed up, I'm just finished talking to them. Now you can take it figuratively and say that our sense of separation grew to the point where we stopped hearing. Not that God stopped talking, that we stopped hearing. And so this is how it's written down. So, but in any case, what I'm here to tell you this morning is God is speaking. God is speaking to you right now. And this goes back to what Meister Eckhart was saying, and when he said that the Bible is not a book about God, it's a book about you. And then his next statement, he says, and you are a book about God.